Show of hands. How many of you have had your hair cut by a professional in the last month? I had mine cut last week. How many of you have ever had your hair cut by a professional? Most adults have had a professional haircut at some point in their lives. Unless you're like my husband, who cuts his own hair because he has an agreement that his hair won't fall out so long as he doesn't let other people touch it. He's into his 40s now, and as you can see, so far so good. What's that saying with football, right? It's only weird if it doesn't work. So far so good. Every state, every person who wants to professionally cut hair has to get a license. Now I'm going to ask you about a driver's license. How many of you drove to today's event, right, or have a driver's license? Great. Much like individuals cutting hair, everyone who wants to drive has to get a license. As part of the process, prospective drivers must take both a knowledge and driving test. One more question. How many states require that everyone who wants to buy a handgun get a purchase license? 9. Only 9 states require that everyone who wants to buy a handgun to first obtain a purchase license, and it involves more than a standard background check. So what exactly is a purchase license? It's a system to ensure that state or local law enforcement agencies have sufficient time to conduct thorough background checks. It's a mechanism to screen out people who have already been legally deemed too dangerous to own guns to make sure they don't get them. And it's a way to increase accountability because sellers can only sell to someone with a valid purchase license. Let me tell you what a purchase license is not. It's not a way to ban gun ownership for everyone. And it's not the creation of a registry of gun owners so the government can come and eventually take all your guns away. And it's not an attack on the Second Amendment. As a researcher who studies gun violence prevention policy, here are the facts. Our research shows that states with purchaser licensing experience fewer gun homicides and gun suicides. Purchaser licensing also makes it harder for guns to enter an illegal market for criminal use. Okay, I have a sense of what some of you might be thinking. Wait, Cass, that's me. Aren't you just a liberal academic from Hopkins? What do you know about guns? I'd like to point out that, yes, I am a liberal. Yes, I'm a researcher at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. Yes, I am also a longtime gun owner. I'm a gun owner who strongly supports the Second Amendment and an individual right to own guns. And I'm a gun owner who pays attention to laws that might infringe upon that right. When I obtained my purchase license, as required by law here in Maryland, a simple Google search helped me identify a certified instructor. I took a 4-hour safety course, had my fingerprints taken, and submitted an online application to state law enforcement for a thorough background check. On a scale of 0 to unconstitutional, I'd rate the process as mildly inconvenient. The question is whether my inconvenience is more important than preventing dangerous or high-risk individuals from getting guns. We all accept inconveniences as part of our daily lives to keep our communities safe. For Americans like me who do want to own guns, being required to obtain a purchase license doesn't prevent me from exercising my Second Amendment right. In fact, courts have consistently upheld that purchaser licensing isn't a violation of the Second Amendment. The fact is, requiring individuals to obtain a purchase license is good for public safety. Now, I'd like to switch gears and talk to you about another kind of licensing. One you might have heard a little bit more about. It's called concealed carry licensing. While a purchase license relates to the process for buying a gun to have in your home, a carry license relates to people carrying loaded, concealed guns in public spaces. We often hear that the only thing that will stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, but they seem to forget us good gals sometimes, and that we need well-trained citizens armed to deter crime and violence. But what does it mean to be well-trained? Our research found that over 80% of US adults want individuals with a carry license to be able to demonstrate they can safely and lawfully use their guns in common situations they might encounter. Over 80%. This is supported equally by gun owners and non-gun owners, Republicans and Democrats. However, the current trend in the US is that states are loosening their standards for carry licensing away from the very thing that gun owners support. In fact, in 12 states, you don't even need to obtain a carry license. Let me repeat that. In 12 states, you don't need to get a license to carry a loaded, concealed gun in public spaces or while driving. Hello, road rage? Think of all the hours of training it took for you to get your driver's license. Can you imagine what might happen to our rates of motor vehicle crashes if states passed laws allowing people to drive without a license? The other 38 states do require a carry license and have standards such as age, criminal history, even quality of character. Among these 38 states, there is significant variation in training standards, from very high to no hands-on demonstration that you know how to use a gun at all. Some of these 38 states do require applicants to shoot at a range, but may not have a proficiency requirement. Let me put that another way. This means that you could miss the target every time, but so long as you fired safely downrange, you'll still be issued a carry license. As part of my application process for a non-resident Florida carry license, I stood at the line at the firing range and proudly shot my paper target. I shoot at the range regularly, partly because if there's ever a zombie apocalypse, I want to be sure that I can incapacitate as many zombies as possible with as few bullets as possible, right? Efficiency, right? But in all seriousness, I want to be certain that were I to ever need to use my gun in self-defense, that I can hit what I'm aiming at. On the other hand, the gentleman next to me hit his target, I'll be generous and say 50% of the time. However, because there's no standard for proficiency, he and I are now equally qualified to carry a loaded concealed gun in public, right? Great idea, right? Imagine letting people who flunked their driver's test to still get a license and share the road with you. How safe would you feel? Most Americans want individuals with a carry license to be able to demonstrate that they're well-trained. But well-trained indicates a relative standard of proficiency that is not currently required in many states. Responsible gun owners may take it upon themselves to enroll in training courses or frequent the range to make sure they can hit their target. But the same cannot be said for everyone. Think of the potential danger that untrained or unlicensed drivers may pose on the road when they aren't required to get a license or undergo training. All this talk about licensing. Why should it matter to you? Currently, states can choose whether or not they want to recognize a carry license from another state. For example, if the state of Maryland thinks another state's standards are too low, Maryland doesn't have to recognize that state's carry license. But there's a push at the national level to pass what's referred to as carry licensing reciprocity. Let me break this down for you. Reciprocity would make a carry license function more like a driver's license, in that it would be valid in any state. I have a driver's license in Maryland, and I can drive across the country to visit my family in Washington state. Reciprocity may seem like a great idea because it's definitely more convenient to have consistency across states. But states have incredibly different training standards for what it takes to get a carry license. In 12 states, you don't have to get a carry license at all. If reciprocity were to pass, a state like Maryland with high training standards would be forced to allow residents from other states to carry here in Maryland, even though those states might have much lower or even no standards for training. Or perhaps more concerning, as a resident of Maryland, I could bypass my state's high training standards and use a non-resident carry license from a state with much lower training standards to carry here in Maryland. How would you feel if we were forced to allow people to drive here in Maryland who aren't required to undergo training or get a license from their home state? Think of the danger those untrained or unlicensed drivers may pose on the road and the risks they might expose us to because of their lack of training. Now, instead of an unlicensed or untrained driver behind the wheel of a car, imagine they're carrying a loaded concealed gun in public. When we look at support for gun violence prevention policy, there is a lot we agree upon because all of us want to live in a safer world. But we're also in a partisan world where opinions are often heard more than facts. But here is a fact. Requiring purchaser licensing and higher training standards for carry licensing are both good for public safety. They will make us safer while still allowing law-abiding citizens like us the ability to exercise our Second Amendment right. The fact is, gun-related deaths now account for almost as many fatalities as motor vehicle crashes. But most of us are around cars far more often than guns. We will all be safer when the requirements for gun purchasing and carrying are at least as high as those for obtaining a driver's license. Take it from a gun owner. As we drive forward to reduce gun violence, we must arm ourselves with facts. Thank you.